When Mordecai learned that the king had given an order to kill him and all of his people just as Haman wanted, Mordecai cried out and he mourned for what Haman was planning to do to him and his people.
No, why? Why would he kill me? Why?
So Mordecai made his own plan. He spoke with Queen Esther and commanded her to go to the king and ask that he would not allow this terrible thing to happen. Esther knew that asking the king for anything without being invited to do so could mean death for her. But Mordecai reminded her,
just because you live in the king's palace, don't think that out of all the Jews, you alone will escape. You might keep quiet at this time, then someone else will help and save the Jews, but you and your father's family will all die. And who knows, you may have been chosen queen for just such a time as this.
Esther bravely said,
then I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And if I die, I die.
And so Mordecai and Esther had a plan to save the Jews. There we go. So we finished last week wondering, what would Esther and Mordecai and the Jews, how would they feel when they got that horrible news that Haman wanted to completely wipe them out? And now we know. Mordecai, he was so unhappy. We're told that he mourned, which is normally the sort of sadness you feel when somebody dies. That's how unhappy he was. That's how sad he was at the news of Haman's plot, his plan to kill all of the Jews. And we're told that the people in Susa, where they're all living, they're all confused. What is going on? This is a really serious situation. It's serious for Esther and for Mordecai and for the Jews, but it's also really serious for the whole history, the whole eternity of God's plan. If the Jews are wiped out, then that's God's plan finished, his promise not kept. So why is God letting this happen? Why is he not doing anything about it that we can see? Has he forgotten his promise? Has he stopped caring? Maybe these are questions that we all have when things are going wrong, when we're sick or we're sad or we're scared. If God cares about me, why doesn't he make me better? Why won't he take the scary thing away? Why won't he stop the sadness? But when it seems like God isn't there, we have to remember what God said. Now for Mordecai, everything is as bad as it could possibly be. His enemy has become the most powerful man in the world apart from the king. And he set out a plan to kill him and all of his people. Life couldn't get any worse. But did you see what Mordecai did? Even though he's as sad as he could possibly be, even though he's as angry as he could possibly be, even though he's as confused as he could possibly be, he makes a plan. He does something. He goes to Queen Esther, his cousin, who he loves, and he tells her to go to the king. Let's have a look again at what he said to her. He says, just because you live in the king's palace, don't think that out of all the Jews, you alone will escape. You might keep quiet at this time. Then someone else will help and save the Jews. But you and your father's family will all die. And who knows, you may have been chosen queen for just such a time as this. Did you see it? Did you see the amazing thing that Mordecai says? Mordecai knows that the Jews will be saved. If it's not Esther who uses her power as queen, then somebody else will come and save the Jews. Mordecai knows that God will save his people. How does he know this? How can he be so sure? The two most powerful men in the whole world have just said, you're going to die. Yet Mordecai can stand there and say, no, the Jews will be saved. How can he say that? Well, Mordecai was so sure because he remembers what God has said and what he's done and what he's like. He remembers that he's the creator of the whole universe, and he remembers all through the Bible that God has said he will keep his promise, and he's shown that he keeps his promise. Like he said to Abraham, he promised, you'll be my people. And this is what God said just before his people went into exile. Remember that the Jews are in Persia because they were captured by the Babylonians, and then the Babylonians were defeated by the Persians. And now the Jews find themselves in this foreign land. But this is what God said to them through one of his messengers just before they went. He says, Babylon will be powerful for 70 years. After that time, I will come to you who are living in Babylon. I will keep my promise to bring you back to Jerusalem, their home. I say this because I know what I have planned for you, says the Lord. I have good plans for you. I don't plan to hurt you. I plan to give you hope and a good future. What beautiful and amazing words. I will come to you and I'll keep my promise and I'll bring you back to me. I have good plans for you. So Mordecai, even in his sadness and his anger and his confusion at this plot to kill him and all of his people, he remembers God's promise. He remembers what God has said to his people. Instead of letting the sadness make him give up or the anger make him do something silly or just doing nothing, he remembers that God is the great promise keeper and he always does what he says he will do. He does something which is amazing. He shows how much he trusts this by saying to his cousin Esther, go to the king. Even if it's risking your life, go to him. Because God will save the Jews. And maybe it's through you. Maybe that's why you've been put as queen at this time. Mordecai trusts that God always keeps his promises. And so he acts in line with that promise. He does something knowing that God keeps his promise. And Esther too, she risks her life to save the Jews because she knows that God has said that they will be saved. Now, what about us? Now we're in an even better position than Mordecai. We can say with even more confidence that God will and does keep his promises. Why do you think that is? Just whisper it to the person next to you. Or don't even whisper it, you can shout it as loud as you want. How can we be so sure that God keeps his promises? Did you say it? Did you hear it? Through Jesus. That's how we know that God always keeps his promises, because he sent Jesus to do it. And we can read about that in his word. He promised to send Jesus, and he sent Jesus to deal with the thing that was keeping us apart from God so that God could bring us back to him, so that we could be his friends, his people again. Jesus took that punishment for us running away from God, and he dealt with it so that we could be friends with God again. He smashed it. He crushed it. When Jesus died on the cross, it would have looked like God's plan was finished. God's plan to save his people is finished. But we know that it wasn't now, don't we? We know that he rose again to show that he had defeated death and that we can be in a relationship with God, that we can be his friends again. He's the perfect promise keeper, and we can trust him with everything, with our lives. So when we trust, we show that we trust. So if you do trust that Jesus has died to take the punishment for our sin, I wonder what you'll do today, this week. Will you read the Bible knowing that they're God's words and that they're true? When life is hard, will you trust that God has promised that you're his when you trust in him? Will you tell people that God saves through Jesus? Will you pray that God does that? Will you care so much for the people because God has said that he cares so much for them that he sent Jesus for them? I wonder what you'll do if you trust that Jesus has died for you, if you trust that God is the great promise keeper.